In the 21st century, the media is often criticized for creating fake news with the intent of achieving specific propagandist objectives. In reality, this practice is as old as time itself. During the Crimean War, English media was rife with correspondence reports describing the atrocities committed by Russian sailors, who allegedly executed helpless Turks after naval battles. The British public, horrified by the brutality of official Petersburg, fervently advocated for a military expedition against the bloodthirsty Russians. Protestants versus Catholics, a pinch of faith, a lot of business. But these are just minor examples. There were even greater fabrications in history. Many recall from school that the term Invincible Armada symbolizes a crushing defeat, a military disaster. This term originates from the Grand Spanish Fleet, which was reportedly decimated by the English. It was said to be such a defeat that Spain supposedly lost its status as a great naval power. In reality, the situation was somewhat different. In 1585, a war broke out between England and Spain. The catalyst for this conflict was London's support for the Protestant rebels in the Netherlands, which were territories under the Spanish crown. The issue wasn't only about the Netherlands. Pirates in the service of the English attacked caravans of ships transporting gold and other valuables to Spain from colonies in America, causing significant damage to Madrid. Additionally, the English attempted to extend their influence over Portugal, which neighbored Spain, by supporting a throne candidate loyal to them. Spain, in turn, supported rebels in Ireland who opposed English dominion. The grand dream of Philip II. King Philip II of Spain took drastic measures. Assembling a fleet of 130 ships divided into 6 squadrons, he planned to land an army of about 30,000 in Britain, decimate English forces, and restore Catholicism in the country. It's not that Philip II's hopes were baseless. The Catholic faction in England was quite strong at that time. Emphasizing the religious component of the expedition, the King of Spain amassed for the fleet, called the Invincible Armada, an entire army of priests, 180 in number. The idea for the expedition belonged to the Spanish Admiral Álvaro de Bazan, Marquis of Santa Cruz. However, during the preparation phase, the admiral passed away, and command was handed over to Alonso Pérez de Guzmán, Duke of Medina, Sidonia. The Duke was an adept organizer, but he lacked naval command skills, which significantly influenced the outcome of the entire campaign. The Duke foresees disaster. On May 29, 1588, about 130 ships departed from the harbour of Lisbon, carrying 30,500 people, including 18,973 soldiers, 8,050 sailors, 2,088 slave rowers, 1,389 officers, noblemen, priests, and doctors. The Armada didn't get far. Due to a powerful storm, they had to make a stop at the port of La Coruna. Duke Medina, Sidonia, assessing the situation, honestly reported to the king, the circumstances were unfavorable, food supplies were insufficient, and many sailors were sick. The commander warned of the high risk of the entire venture failing. But Philip II was already set on the victory of Catholicism in England and had no intention of changing plans. The element of surprise was out of the question under such conditions. When the Invincible Armada finally approached the shores of England, it was met by forces assembled by Queen Elizabeth I. These forces consisted not only of Britain's regular naval fleet but also Dutch ships, as well as pirates led by Francis Drake. The decisive battle. The Spanish ships were significantly heavier, with their armament primarily consisting of numerous short-range cannons. In contrast, the lighter British vessels had the advantage of maneuverability and, thanks to their long-range cannons, could strike the enemy while remaining invulnerable to retaliatory fire. In the minor skirmishes of early August 1588, pirates were the most successful. Drake, for example, managed to capture one of the severely damaged Spanish ships. However, this didn't give the English a decisive advantage. The Armada anchored near Calais, waiting for the arrival of Allied forces led by the Spanish governor of the Netherlands, the Duke of Parma. But the actions of the English, strong winds, and currents prevented the Spanish from receiving this assistance. On August 8, 1588, the Battle of Gravelines took place, considered the main event in the history of the Invincible Armada's defeat. By this time, the British ships had managed to resupply with gunpowder and cannonballs, while the situation for the Spanish was nearing critical. The 9-hour-long firefight revealed that British artillery held a significant advantage over the Spanish. The English sank 2 enemy ships and damaged several more. Some vessels ran aground due to damage and were captured by the British and their allies. Storms and disease more fearsome than cannons. However, a decisive victory was not achieved. The English were cautious, fearing hand-to-hand combat. The commander of the Armada, Duke Medina Sidonia, concluded that under the circumstances, he couldn't achieve his objectives and ordered a retreat. The British didn't pursue them for long, wary of Spanish cunning and recognizing that the Armada still had considerable strength. In reality, the Spanish, after circling Scotland, entered the Atlantic and set a course for home. This is where the real disaster struck. The area was unfamiliar to Spanish captains. The ships of the Armada were battered by storms, some crashed off the coasts of Ireland, others simply sank. On the surviving ships, many sailors were washed overboard, while the remaining suffered from hunger and diseases. By mid-October 1588, about half of the ships that had participated in the campaign returned to Spain. The blow to Spain was severe, but not fatal. Most wounded was the pride of Philip II. The idea of restoring Catholicism in England had utterly failed. The counter-visit of the English Armada. The English began to tout their success, proclaiming it was solely due to God's will. The British were so convinced that Spain was utterly defeated and would never rise again that in 1589, they dispatched their own fleet to the shores of Spain, known as the English Armada. The campaign was costly, so its funding had to be collaborative, sourced from Queen Elizabeth I herself, English and Dutch magnates. Each sponsor had their own stakes in this expedition and each tried to impose their objectives onto the fleet. As a result, the English Armada was tasked with several challenging and divergent missions: to burn the Spanish war fleet in the Atlantic, capture ships carrying silver from the Americas, instigate an anti-Spanish uprising in Portugal, and establish a base for the English fleet on the Azores Islands. A significant portion of the sponsors, including Drake himself, directly hoped to recoup their expenses by plundering poorly defended Spanish towns. Command was entrusted once again to Drake. The English Armada consisted of 6 royal galleons, 60 English armed merchant ships, 60 Dutch flat-bottomed vessels, and about 20 pinnaces. Initially, things went well for the English. Attacking La Coruna, they destroyed 13 ships in the harbor, captured parts of the city, killed several hundred Spaniards, and secured wine cellars for themselves. Francis Drake's failure. However, the English did not fully capture La Coruna. The defenders withstood the siege, inflicting significant damage on the attackers. The siege of Lisbon also came to nothing, as capturing it seemed impossible without heavy artillery. At any rate, Drake attributed the failure to the lack of such weaponry. To add to the confusion, the pirates mistakenly captured French merchant vessels. Despite France being neutral in this context, the English treasury had accumulated massive debts from recent wars, including debts to France. Queen Elizabeth herself had to offer apologies. Soon, Drake realized it was time to retreat. Losses mounted. The gentlemen of fortune who had joined the expedition hoping for easy spoils began to desert en masse, and epidemics broke out among the ships. Much like the Spanish, the English suffered the majority of their losses on the return journey. While the Spanish destroyed 14 ships of the English Armada, over 20 were lost to storms. In casualties, injuries, and disease-related deaths, the English Armada lost up to 15,000 men. Peace on status quo terms. The Anglo-Spanish War continued until 1604, culminating in the Treaty of London, signed by the successors of the previous monarchs, James I and Philip III. Essentially, the agreement was established on status quo terms, neither side acquired any territories. The Spanish committed not to support Catholicism in England anymore, while the English withdrew their support for the rebellious Netherlands. The Spanish did lose in one aspect: public relations. It never occurred to them to glorify the defeat of Drake's Armada as the British did with their victory over the Invincible Armada.